everybody, and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson in Albany. New York's license plates are changing again, if you haven't heard, and you have a chance to choose the design for a new one. But the story has an interesting little wrinkle to it. Am I right? First, let's take a look at those 5 choices. 4 include the Statue of Liberty in some form or another. 1 features the new Mario M. Cuomo Bridge in New York City. People can vote online for their favorite design until September 2nd. Plates with the new design will start being issued in April. Now, the governor says replacing aging plates will eliminate legibility issues that hinder license plate readers, which are used by law enforcement, red light cameras, and the new cashless tolling systems. But here's the hook. The estimated 3 million vehicles with old plates will be issued new ones when they renew their registration for a $25 fee. Now, people who want to keep their same plate number will have to pay an extra $20 on top of that. But people with peeling plates will get new ones for free. Several officials on both sides of the aisle are questioning that part, and they're taking action to block those fees. Republican State Senator Robert Ortt from Western New York and Democratic Assemblyman Angelo Santabarbara from right here in the Capital Region have each drafted separate legislation to end those fees. The state's GOP chair, Nick Langworthy, calling them, quote, another cash grab. But the governor says it's quite the opposite.
I don't want to buy new plates either. But it's 10 years. You need a plate that works with E-ZPass. You know, if it doesn't work with E-ZPass, then we have talk about a money grab. We have the opposite problem. We're going to have a real fiscal issue because we will have a deficit when it comes to the toll collection. So this is saving consumers in the long term.
The new plates will officially replace the state's old blue and white plates, which were discontinued when the state changed to the current gold and blue ones back in 2010. The governor says, quote, many of them are damaged, oxidized, and peeling, making it difficult or impossible to read the license plate number. The DMV will stop issuing those old ones once the new ones become available. All right, but some of the people who are going to be most affected by this are the folks at your local DMV. One of those people is Rensselaer County Clerk Frank Marola, who joins us here on Empire State Weekly now, along with our weekly contributor, WGY radio anchor, Diane Donato. Frank, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about the plates. You're a little fired up about this.
Well,
a lot of the county clerks are. And your biggest bone of contention is what here? Really, the fees?
Is the price.
Yeah.
$25 for a new set of plates. New Jersey's doing a plate exchange. They're charging $6. I mean, if they want to give new plates out, I can understand that, but they shouldn't be charging the public $25 and an additional $20 if they want to keep the same number.
Let's talk a little bit about the registration fees that we pay. What do they actually pay for?
Yeah,
What's that money going for first?
That goes back to the state coffers, I believe. I mean, we don't see it back in DMV. I can assure you that. And our lines are over. We're overwhelmed with customers coming in now with Real ID and enhanced licenses. So we don't need another additional thing to do, which is giving out the brand new plates.
Now, the governor and the DMV make the argument that these plates are old. 10-year lifespan. We know there are issues with some that are legitimately peeling. Yeah. But you took issue when he said this affects license plate readers and especially the E-ZPass system.
E-ZPass. There's no problem with E-ZPass. We've never heard of one single problem. And I think they went out to talk to people who were involved with the E-ZPass. They don't see any issue with it. I think what it is just a money grab. And then what they do is they just try to get it out there. They throw out the idea, let's pick a new plate. Everybody gets all excited. Geez, look at the new plates. But then they look at the fee, and no one's happy with that fee.
Now, along those lines about the readability issue, similar things have happened in other states like Massachusetts. They've also gone to cashless tolling. Have they had any problems that we know of?
No issue at all with it. And I think Patterson tried to do the same thing back in 2008. He came out with the gold plate. He wanted all the white plates gone. And the clerks fought back. We did a petition drive. We got thousands of signatures. The fee was going to be the same, $25, $20 additional fee. And the people, the public just weren't up for it. And we did change the plate, but there was no additional fee.
And some of the numbers that are out there, I mean, we're talking, they say 3 million plates they'd like to see replaced at a minimum of $25. In some cases, it would be $45 if you want to keep the same number. So that's a big chunk of change for the state if this is realized.
It really is. It's I heard upwards of $200 million. But not everyone has one car. You have multiple cars. You have a trailer. You have a motorcycle. Those are all fees that are going to be added on top of it. It's not just one car, $25.
Again, another question about where the money goes. The governor, in defending this week, also said, well, if we don't charge people for this, people who are not drivers are actually going to have to subsidize somehow something. Are
Yeah.
we?
I think it's just a lie from the beginning, and it's a lie right straight through. He's just trying to give it an excuse as to why he wants to raise a couple $100 million. You know, we talk $25, but when you talk $25 on every car in New York State, that's a big fee.
And we know a lot of the state representatives, assemblymen, senators are up in arms about this as well. In fact, at least on the assembly side, Angelo Santa Barbara is pushing forward some legislation to make sure that fee doesn't get charged if its normal registration fees are associated with it.
Yeah, well, we have county clerks now also looking to do petition drives. We're going to be putting petitions right on the counter when the public, we're the ones that actually answer to the public. And when the governor does something, he may see something on television, he may see something in the news, but we see people every single day that come in and are going to be complaining about that $25 fee.
So, operating a DMV office for so many years and as a county clerk, do you have enough funding from the state? I know I've heard some criticisms in the past, especially when we're looking at the Real ID and processing all
Yeah.
of this. Do you feel like the
I don't
state
feel like
is
the money has ever been there from the state. We get 12.7%. We've gotten that for the last 15 to 20 years.
12.7% of the fees that come in? you
Of
get
every
to keep.
transaction that we process.
Okay.
So if they do raise the fees, we would get more money, but I'd much rather see them take some money and put it into the equipment and actually better training the public than what they do right now.
So you're among a small group of county clerks also who've been protesting over the green light law. You're very concerned about that. You've actually
Correct.
filed a lawsuit. You have said, publicly stated, that you will not grant a driver's license to somebody who is undocumented. Where
Yeah.
does that stand?
We went back to deja vu. I remember in 2007 when Spitzer was there, it was the exact same thing. He tried to give license to people here illegally. That was defeated. I said at that time I would never process a license to someone that comes into my office that can't prove they're here illegally. And I'm going to stand with that. I'll never do it.
Now, for a lot of those people who are here and working, you know, the state's argument is that this is going to make things safer for people. But you say still no go.
Yeah, it's not about the actual driver. If they want to give them a driver's license, they can give them a license that looks different than your license. But what they're going to do is that license will look identical to any license in New York State. It'll say not for federal purposes. My license says not for federal purpose. So it'd be no different. And it's really, I said it before, I say it again, it's about voting. It's not really about driving.
So you would be willing to do some kind of a compromise, though, if there were some way they could differentiate it more?
Yeah, if they give them a license without 9 digits, because that's what you need to register to vote. You need either a Social Security number or you need a 9-digit driver's license number. If they were to give them a license that didn't have 9 digits, they would never be able to register to vote, and I can understand that.
Okay. All right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, Frank, remind people about Real ID, enhanced driver's
Yeah,
license
yeah,
ID.
we're-
When's the deadline?
October 2020, so they got a little bit of time. They got time to do it. It only takes about 10 days to get that license back, so it's not a real rush.
Okay.
We're at a peak season when we're in the summertime. It's always busy there. You might want to wait until it slows down a little in November and December and January to do it. So.
The Real ID is going to be mandatory for everybody, but what's the difference between that and the enhanced license?
Well, it's not mandatory. It's mandatory to be able to fly domestically. You can have
Right.
there can be 3 tiers. You have a regular driver's license, you'll have a Real ID, or the enhanced. The enhanced lets you to travel the Western Hemisphere, and that's only land and sea travel.
Gotcha. All right, Frank Marola, Rensselaer County Clerk, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up here on Empire State Weekly, the results are in. We'll take a look at the test scores from this year's math and language arts tests and speak with the person who's overseeing the education department as she enters her final week in charge before moving on. And as always, if you've got a comment, story idea, let us know. Shoot us an email. It's right there on your screen. Or reach out to Empire State Weekly on Facebook and Twitter. All right, welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. A federal judge has denied an attempt to block New York's new mandatory vaccination law. That judge rejected the request for a preliminary injunction, saying the law doesn't specifically prevent them from going to school. Advocates for upholding the recently eliminated religious exemption said it denies students their right to an education. The ruling comes just under 2 weeks before students are scheduled to return to the classroom. School testing results are now in from this year's 3rd through 8th grade mathematics ELA exams, and those results were up across the board. State Education Department says Black, Hispanic, and Native American students all showed improvement, closing the achievement gap on their white and Asian American classmates. Just over 1 million students took the exams, including nearly 200,000 on a computer. 16% of students opted out of the state test, and that's down 2% from last year. And joining us now to discuss this year's test results is New York State Education Department Commissioner Mary Ellen Elia, and of course our weekly contributor, WGY radio anchor, Diane Donato. Commissioner, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Appreciate it.
So let's talk about this. We'll jump right into it. The numbers are out. The good news that you're reporting is they are up. What's the positive thing here that you're taking away from this latest round?
Well, I think you pointed out. I mean, we're certainly going in the right direction. Our ELA scores, English Language Arts scores, the proficiency levels there are 45.4% of our students increased, and that's a 0.2 percentage point increase. Not great, but it's moving the right direction. I think mathematics is a little bit better, 2.2 percentage points increase to 46.7. So when you think about over 1,090,000 students across New York State taking the assessments in grades 3 through 8, we have an increase in both of the areas, ELA and mathematics. And as we move forward, we've got to build on that. The major focus is equity. Does everybody have the opportunities that they need across New York to be successful?
And that's an area where you saw some improvement this year when you made those comparisons.
We actually did. So the gap that occurs between African American and Hispanic students, we have lessened the gap over a 4-year period. We're down about 5 or 6 points in that gap, and that's a really good thing, but there still is much work to do.
I still can't help but think it's got to be a little disheartening when you look at all the time and effort that's been put into these exams, the money that the state spends on education, to still have such a large number of students failing to show proficiency in these exams.
Right. And so in our data that I'm sure you've seen, we do show where we are with those that are just below the level of proficiency, and those certainly. The one powerful thing is to remember is that this is one piece of a picture of how a school or a district is doing.
Right.
It isn't telling you that a single student is going to be successful or not. What it's giving you is one piece. And so the powerful thing about using assessments is what can you do, what information can you glean that can help you to improve? Mm-hmm. And we think that's a really important part of the use of the assessments. So in a particular school, and a grade level in that school, are there some things that I need to look at? And the teachers and the administrators can look at specific standards associated with each question. And then one other thing I want to say is 75% of the questions that were on this assessment are online. So the people of New York can look at those questions and they can see these are the things that we would expect your child to be able to answer on the assessments.
And I know you've said that teachers have been more involved in helping to craft those questions. You look, though, also at the numbers for the Big 5 school districts. So if I were a parent in Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, New York City, a lot of places, I'd be concerned. Even though we see improvements, the numbers, as you've said, there's a lot of work to be done. New York State occasionally steps in and provides even more assistance to schools. Are we getting anywhere near that happening in these types of districts?
Well, we have, when I first came, the receivership had just been passed and signed by the governor, which is identification of some of the lowest performing schools in the state, and then a much more strong presence of state education involved in those schools. We've seen some major improvements in those schools. There's much to be done. You know, changes don't come to a school overnight. It takes time, it takes constant effort from administrators, from teachers, and from parents. And so I think it's really important for us to look at it over the long run. Are we making improvements? And I think you can say that we are making improvements, and even in those districts that we know have been problematic. I would say that, that in Buffalo and in Rochester, Buffalo and Syracuse, Rochester has more work to do. They are one of the target areas in the state. That district particularly has a very high percentage of districts that have been identified under our new accountability system. And we really need to make sure as New Yorkers that every child in the state, but particularly in those urban centers, and Rochester is one of them, that they're getting what they need to be successful.
Students still allowed to opt out, although less so than we've seen since the test's been implemented. How much does that impact these numbers? Or does it impact it at all?
Well, so all we can say is what we know based on 1,090,000 students across the state taking the test. And let me say, I think when I first came, many factors contributed to people being just distrustful of state education and where we were going. I've spent a lot of time in working with those groups, parents, particularly teachers though, but parents and administrators, to have them become part of the system and support us in improving. There's no question we need to get better, and there's no question we have schools in New York that need to get better, and we have to help to make sure that those schools know what they need to do and they move that direction. So I would say to you that yes, the opt-out numbers, when I came they were 21%. They're down now to 16%. It's a matter of earning the trust of people across the state. And I think having teachers be very involved in the development of the assessments, they're writing the questions, they're telling us what questions should be on the assessments. They're in every part of that process, they are involved. And then the fact that we release the questions, 75% of them, the highest number of any state in the country. The fact that over a period of time, you can see more and more parents are allowing their children to take the test. We aren't going to win back that trust automatically. I mean, it has to come because of actions that we've taken. We also shortened the test. We heard that was a big issue, so we went from a 3-day to a 2-day test. So there's a number of factors. There's still a lot of work to be done. Our assessment program can improve, there's no question. But we have done a lot to include teachers and listen to teachers so that they're aware that we are listening, and we know, I know as a commissioner, that teachers are the most important part of this whole equation.
Thank you very much.
All right, Commissioner Mary Ellen Elia, thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck in your next endeavor.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Pleasure
coming
to be
in.
here.
Coming up, the state is doing even more to protect crime victims. A week after the opening of the Child Victims Act, the look-back window. What more new laws signed this past week mean for protecting you from any danger. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. 9 more people have now sued Boy Scouts here in New York State, saying they were molested by adult Scout leaders. The lawsuits allege the Boy Scouts were negligent in failing to stop the abuse. One also aims to force the organization to release files, secret files, containing information and documents on Scout leaders with allegations of sexual misconduct against children. Nearly 500 lawsuits have been filed since the opening of New York's 1-year look-back window. Governor Cuomo has signed 3 new laws increasing protections for crime victims. They allow domestic violence victims now to seek damages against people who violate an order of protection, make victims of unlawful surveillance crimes eligible for compensation, and expands the definition of child victim to include children who witness a crime. Another prevents courts from placing children in the custody of someone convicted of a felony sexual offense against a minor, or allowing those convicts to have unsupervised visits with them. And a 5th specifies what accommodations employers must provide for victims of domestic violence, expanding existing protections. New York is fighting back against a policy a state leader says unfairly targets immigrants. Coming up, why Attorney General Letitia James is going after the Trump administration when it comes to their proposed federal rule change. Welcome back. Finally, for us here on Empire State Weekly, New York Attorney General Letitia James is filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration's proposed public charge rule that provides support to immigrants. Proposed rules set to take effect in October would broaden the range of programs that can disqualify immigrants from getting green cards and visas by deeming them a, quote, burden to the U.S. Now, this would apply to immigrants with low incomes or little education that use government assistance programs like Medicaid, food stamps, and housing vouchers.
By expanding the public charge definition far beyond its historical and statutory boundaries, this new rule would effectively exclude from entry into the United States millions of black and brown low-income immigrants, many of whom are on their way to build stable and more prosperous lives, and many who will be elected officials in the state of New York.
Attorney General Letitia James there says the rule is a clear violation of American values and also 130 years of case law. Well, that does it for us here on Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson in Albany. We'll see you back here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. There's the full schedule across 10 regions of the state.